Okay, we are live. I'm just waiting for it to come through on YouTube, and then I will mute that and we will get rolling. We have a few people waiting. Sorry, we're running a couple minutes late. I was sorting my screens out. Okay, here it comes. Oop, let me just make sure the sound's okay. Yeah, that sounds fine. And the video's good. Okay, welcome everybody. While we're getting started, if you have any wins that you want to share, you can type those in the chat box using the hashtag win. And if you want to share where you're at in your progress, you can put that in the chat box with the hashtag progress. Oop. Okay, hello and welcome everybody. This is Michele Christensen of One Noteworthy Life, and this will be stream number 4 of the Getting Things Done series here on my channel. And we'll be going through the book section by section in this series and focusing on implementing what we read. We'll be taking your questions and comments throughout this live video in the YouTube chat box, and you're always free to comment later in the comment section below. Super chats will be available at the bottom of the chat box throughout this live chat, and this is a way to financially support the channel in any amount you choose, and that'll get your comment highlighted. So let me go ahead and this one. Okay. So we are working from the updated 2015 version of Getting Things Done, which is available on Amazon. And this is the cover that you should have. There's a link to that in the description of this video if you need a copy. And that link is my Amazon affiliate link. And so I would love it if you purchased it through there. I earn a small commission at no cost to you. I do want to encourage you to weigh in with any thoughts, questions, comments, experiences, and things like that. One of the reasons I chose to do this as a live stream is so that it could be more interactive. And I'm really passionate about sharing our knowledge and experiences so that everyone can benefit. Now, the idea of interacting and sharing our knowledge leads me perfectly to what you may have already noticed, which is that we have somebody else. We have a special guest today. Allow me to introduce Clark, joining us from Cheltenham, England. Clark and I collaborated on a GTD presentation last week, and I noticed that one of the really valuable parts was when we were interacting and responding to questions. So I had this flash inspiration to invite him to join us tonight, and he agreed. So welcome, Clark. Can you tell people more about yourself for people that don't know you?
Oh, hi, Michelle. Yes, I'm Clark Lawson. As you said, I live in Cheltenham, UK, which is in the Cotswolds. For those people who aren't familiar, I'm an IT manager for a financial services company, and doing some data engineering, that type of work. But outside of work, I've got a wife and young son, and my hobbies are running and cycling, as you can probably tell by the equipment behind me.
Oh, that's cool. Awesome. And Clark is reading GTD along with us, so he has some really good, observations and things that he's experiencing as he's learning. And if you have any wins that you want to share, you can do that now or at any time. If not,
Yeah,
that's fine too.
Yeah, I guess the thing for me at the minute is really trying to do some of the implementation aspects, particularly of this section. I feel I'm quite good at capturing stuff now and clarifying it. It's then organizing it into something that's usable. I wouldn't say it's a win at the minute, but I'm just trying to implement those tips in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel like, as I was preparing for this section and rereading it, there are some really good um, tips in the book about what it means to get organized. And he has a little bit of a different take, I think, than a lot of the sort of generic information about there. And Clark and I are going to be very casual. We didn't pre-select anything that we're going to talk about, so he'll just be jumping in, and you can jump in at any time that you want to. So go ahead and, hop on in.
Okay, will do.
All right. So the first thing I want to just quickly review the 5 stages of the GTD workflow so we figure out where organize fits in. And we have the 5 stages are capture, which is to collect everything that may have meaning for you. Clarify, and that's where we make a quick decision on what this thing is and what it means for us. And then today we'll be covering organize, which is step 3, and that's to put the item where it belongs. Step number 4 is to reflect, and that's where we want to review commitments regularly and make bigger decisions about whether or not and what to do. And then finally, step 5 is engage, where we're actually doing things. So this is just a super quick recap. We did cover this in more detail in the last stream. So if you need more information or you haven't yet covered this, you can go ahead and back and watch that stream. And I also want to quickly review the workflow diagram because the organize step fits in well to this. And this is all marked up because it's also from the last stream. And we did go over this in more detail. So again, I'm going to go through it quickly. Starting at the top, we collect things. Either it's already collected for us in an inbox, or we collect it ourselves into some kind of container. The first question to ask is, what is it? And then the next step is it actionable? Once you've determined these 2 things, everything lands in one of the 8 spots on the perimeter of the diagram, and there's like a little orange mark on each of the 8 of them. So if it's not actionable, it's going to land in one of the 3 items at the top right of the perimeter. So it either goes in the trash, it goes into an incubate file, which might be like a someday later or something that you might need a reminder for, and then it can go, or it might just be pure reference. So those are your no's, 1, 2, 3 spots out of 8. If it has an action, if it is actionable, it can land in one of the other 5 spots on the perimeter. The first of those is on the upper left of the perimeter, and that's projects. So this incoming thing may represent a new project, in which case you capture it on your project list. Or it may represent project materials. And we'll get into this more later, but your project materials are stored separately by project. And then those get reviewed, and you may get next action steps from those during the weekly review process. So that takes up 2 of the remaining 5 of the 8 projects and project plans on the upper left of the perimeter of the diagram. And then if it is actionable, but it's not project related, we have the final 3 spots, which is that you can put it on your calendar, it can be on a next action list, or it can go onto, if you're delegating it, it goes onto a waiting for list. So Clark, any comments, feedback before we move into?
Yeah, I guess the main bit for me when I'm trying to organise things is I guess I wasn't really certain what the definition of a project was, and it took me quite a while to try and understand that. And I think you've talked about it on the previous webcasts around, if it's a collection of items rather than just planning the party. I think was the example that you gave, and that's I guess I'm still struggling with where to put those kind of project files and project plans, because you don't want lots and lots of folders. I guess that's what you end up having is lots and lots of folders, either virtually or physically. So I'm just trying to kind of process that in my mind, because projects are captured differently in different places. So at work we capture it in a different tool, kind of home life is probably captured in a different tool and that sort of thing. So it's just trying to process that and trying to figure out a way that's consistent that I can implement.
Yeah. And I don't know how strongly I feel about the idea that things have to be captured like in the same place or in the same format or in the same manner. Someone left a comment on a prior stream talking about how I'm trying to get everything all in one place, and my system is very what's the saying? It's like just kind of a like this piece together, because I have tools that I've been using before I ever started reading GTD that work really great, and I don't want to change them. And then I have tools that don't, some of my projects, I might put together an entire OneNote notebook because it's very big and comprehensive. Other projects are just a list. So as long as, and on my project list, I do put where the project material is for that reason, because I have it stored in different places. And I think at this point, as long as it's in a place and you know where it is, I don't know I don't know that I feel like it's important to have everything in one place. Like that's something that doesn't seem to be a barrier for me anyway.
Yeah, in parts of me thinks that's not really possible to have it in one place either. It's like the impossible, so stop trying, striving for that.
Yeah, yeah. And they don't always, the best tool for something isn't always the same thing. Like if you have something that's just a simple checklist, but if it is a project, but it can be tracked on one page of either digital or physical paper, versus something that's, a much more comprehensive thing that might require like a whole, OneNote notebook or something like that, that, use the best tool, and don't, I wouldn't necessarily be focused on having them in the same place. So, but it does help me, like I said, on my project list, I do have where the project material is stored so that I remember that. And that helps me. So, and there is in this, I had kind of an epiphany myself on this read through about projects. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. And, oh, okay. So Lisa, hi, Lisa. And hi, Linda. Hi, Deb. We have people here from a few different places in the US. Um, Lisa said, I think a key thing that you said is the note about where the detail is. And yeah, I do. I keep my project list on a Google Sheet. And you talk about like adding yet another tool in, but it works. It just seems to be the best tool for me to use. And I have the project, and then there's a column for where is the project material stored, so that I know where to go to look for that when I review it. So good. I'm glad that was a useful tip. Um, so let me get back to, so we've gone through the workflow diagram. So we're going to move on to the organize section. And this number you see at the top of your screen in highlighted in orange, that's the Kindle location if you're reading on Kindle. So we're at location 989. So right at the beginning of this section, there's a few really good points I wanted to mention. The section starts with a quote that reads, being organized simply, let me, this is the nice thing about using OneNote, is I can make changes on the fly. So being organized means, oh, means simply that where something is matches what it means to you. And I really like this because the same exact item could mean different things to different people. And so I used the example of an invitation before. And for one person, that invitation could be just a quick 2-minute action, like, oh, yeah, I know for sure I'm going to this. And for someone else, it could be something that they set aside and need to do some more research on when the event becomes closer. Before they can make a decision about whether or not to go. So, same item, an invitation to the same thing, but it means different things to different people. And so I liked that it doesn't just mean putting it into a category, it means putting it someplace where it matches what it means to you. The second point, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but the outer ring of the workflow diagram shows 8, and there's only 8, which I think is amazing. There's only 8 categories for things to go once all your stuff is processed, and I just find that so kind of amazing that all of this complexity and stuff, it's only going to one of 8 places. And then the final thing he mentions is that all 8 of your categories need physical or digital containers of some sort. And I thought that that was really important because um, we want to, I think that's a recurring theme throughout GTD, is that your categories need to be well defined and then in some sort of container. And then the container needs criteria for what goes in it or what doesn't go in it. And the idea is that you don't want to end up with a mix of things in the same container, like actionable or non-actionable, or things that are just reference versus things that are to be acted on. The more tightly defined you can make those categories and containers, I think the more actionable things are, and the easier it is to know what you're looking at. So in this section in the book, David Allen starts with the 5 categories of things that are actionable and then goes on to the 3 that are not actionable. And I'm going to flip it around to do the non-actionable first, because I think that it's just more clear, and we can get the things that don't require any action just out of the picture, and then we can talk about things that do require action. So I'm going to jump ahead to location 1086, which is non-actionable items. Oh, let me just make that. There we go. So I'm just going to check the chat real quick. Huh. Yeah, Lisa says only 8 is actually freeing, and I totally agree, Lisa. It's kind of, like I said, it's just kind of mind-blowing to me that it's only 8. And when you're sorting, it's not like you have this infinite list, it's 8. So non-actionable items, we have 3 categories, and I'm just going to pull up the workflow diagram real quick to go back to that. So our non-actionable items are up at the top right of the perimeter, and they're circled in blue on this marked up diagram. We have trash, incubate, or reference. So trash is pretty obvious. The one point he makes about it is don't leave trash in your system, because it just kind of clogs things up and it undermines your desire for control and clarity. The next category is incubation, and in the book he further breaks this into 2 categories, which is someday maybe, or a reminder or a tickler file. The someday maybe list is around location 1102, and this is a holding place for things that you may want to do someday. And I have found this a really helpful tool to just drop in all those ideas. Like when you hear about something cool, but you're not ready to act on it, and you're not thinking about it anytime in the near future, just to have a place to put that. Like I feel like it frees me up from trying to remember those things. And then it also gives you kind of a big reference library of things to go back to the next time you're looking for things that are cool to do. Then the reminder or tickler items, these are held in suspense until a time in the future where you have set a reminder for yourself. And I think he calls it a tickler file because there's a way to build out a paper filing system where it reminds you of things in the future. And I think that would be called like a tickler file, because it gives you like a poke or a tickle on the right day. But I think most of us would use a digital reminder for that. And then around location 1101, he gives some examples of things that might be on a someday maybe list. So it could be things like travel to a certain place, learn Spanish, or build a koi pond. He mentions that you might have specific types of someday maybe lists for things that you have when that desire strikes. So these could be like books you want to read, music to listen to, restaurants to try. And this is helpful because when you are ready to start a new book, you have a set list already of books that you might want to read. And then a final point about the someday maybe list is that he suggests that you review it regularly to get the most value from it. You could include this in your weekly review, but I have quite a bit on here. I probably have a couple of 100 things. So I think it's important that you just review it often enough that you feel a sense of relaxed control. And then for the reminder or tickler system, this is just stuff you can stash aside. I call it pending, and I put things in that pending file, and then I just give myself a digital reminder for when I want to look at it. So for example, if you have a big, like say it's a professional conference that happens in 6 months, but you can't decide now if you're going to go or not, I might put a reminder for 4 months to look at that and make a decision about whether or not I'm going to go. So let me check the chat here. And Clark, any comments right now?
Yeah, I think the bit that I've struggled on, particularly in this section of non-actionable items, is I used to reference everything, even if there wasn't really anything really relevant for me. So I didn't really trash anything. So I used to get hundreds of emails a day at work, and a lot of them would end up in reference. And then when I needed to try and find something, there was just too much. So I am a lot more stricter with, do I actually bin it or add it to my reference my kind of reference file. So that's the bit. I probably don't do much stuff on Sunday maybe lists. Maybe I need to be better at that, but I guess you just need to be a bit. The bit that's helped me is to be a bit more, a kind of bit more decisive in actually this ain't gonna. I definitely don't need this, and delete it rather than we never know. Particularly a thing that I found really helps me is anything that I get CC'd into at work. That just goes into a folder that I never review unless someone asks me to review it, and then then the conversation I have with them when they say, oh, "Haven't you seen this email?" I'm like, "Well, no, because you've made a decision to exclude me on the to box and just put me on the courtesy copy. So you've already decided that it's not important for me to have it." If you're with me, so that helps to reduce the amount of inbox that I get. But yeah, trashing a lot of stuff is helps, particularly to then look at the reference material when you need it.
That I think that's a really good rule because it's something you can set up if you use Outlook or probably a lot of email programs that if you're CC'd, it just goes into a folder that you don't look at. And that is just an amazing tip. Like I can't even imagine how much email that cuts down on because you think about how easy it is to see. Yeah, okay, yep, the chat's weighing in. That's a great idea, Clark, on the CC. Um, you can imagine someone writing an email and then CCing 8 other people. And, so you could be cutting down on, I don't even know how many, dozens of emails every day just by not looking at the CCs. And you're right. Like if you are CC'd, it's probably not that important that you see it. There's someone else who's the main recipient of that. And if they need something from you, they can email you directly. So I think that's a great rule. Yeah,
Uh,
that's really
a,
good.
a similar one that I have is when I go on holiday or on annual leave, is I just tell people that I'm deleting my emails, and
Nice.
so that when I get back, I can action straight away. So rather than get, for 2 weeks, I'd probably get 2,000 to 3,000 emails to then sift through for a couple of days, and a lot of it is just junk in reality.
Mhm.
And so by saying I'm deleting emails on my out of office, then a lot of people choose then not to email me because they know I'm not going to get it.
Wow.
And then I just say, if you want me when I get back, put a calendar reminder in to contact me when I'm back. So again, I find that's helpful when I then return from holiday. That the stuff that's in my inbox is probably the stuff I really need to action.
That's really good. That's another really good tip because I feel like email is just this thing that weighs on everybody. Like everybody gets so many emails, and it's just such a pervasive and common and relatable problem. Um, and it's so I think that those are really good tips, like sort of the general philosophy behind them, but specifically for email, which is great. I'm just curious if you have had any pushback or any trouble doing that, or if you had to go through that a few times before people, understood that and dealt with it. Like, what's been your experience implementing that?
Yeah, there's not, particularly with the deleting whilst I'm on holiday. There's definitely been no pushback on any of that. I've done that for a few years now,
Hmm.
and I haven't had any pushback or any particular comments on it. A lot of people have said it's a good idea and it's something that they would want to try themselves.
That's great. Yeah, so those are really great email tips. And I think your other point about not being as rigorous as you could be with trashing things is also good because it's kind of the thing that he points out that if there's too much trash in your system, it makes it hard to find what you really need. Um, but it is hard. I mean, I want to acknowledge it's hard for everybody. It's hard to, especially with digital stuff because we have like virtually unlimited space. It's kind of like, oh, I can just keep this. It's no problem. But, you know, it is good to trash things that are trash. And sometimes when I see something online, like I'll see a really good article, like how to, uh, the 5 hottest tips for using Instagram stories or something like that. And I'm tempted to keep it because, someday I want to go back and become better at using my Instagram stories, but that's not anything I'm going to do. I probably have enough projects lined up for the next 2 years. So I'm not going to get to that for at least 2 years. And by that time, it'll be irrelevant. So I've had to force myself not to hang on to stuff like that because at that point, there'll be a whole different set of best practices for Instagram Reels. So, um, oh, Clark has muted himself again. So let me jump back here. And I think we kind of touched on this already. The third category of non-actionable items is reference material. And there's a much more detailed discussion in the book, but it's references useful information that you don't have to act on right now. And the one important point he makes is to store your reference material in a way that you can find it when you need it. And one thing I like to do with my reference material is to add a line of keywords to it. So if it's a text document, I just type at the very bottom of it keywords. And I type in what I think I might be looking for when I'm looking for that item. So if it's a cookie recipe, but I know that it's my aunt's Christmas cookie recipe, I may not remember what the cookies are called, but I'm going to remember that they're Christmas cookies and that they're my aunt's. So in the keywords, I might write Christmas cookies, Christmas desserts, and Aunt Joan's cookie recipe. So instead of just storing it as a cookie recipe, I'm thinking about where my mind is going to be when I'm looking for that recipe. So that covers all the non-actionable items. And I'm just going to go back to the workflow diagram here. So that covers those top right 3 items. And let's just check the chat here. And Clark, you can jump in if you have anything.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so at the minute.
All
Yeah.
right. And Lisa says keywords is a great idea. Thank you. That's glad to hear that's useful. So now we're going to go to the actionable items slide. And there are 5 categories of actionable items. And these are the project list, the project support materials, the calendar, next action lists, and waiting for. So these are items you have delegated. So just going back to the workflow diagram, these are the other 5. Starting with the upper left of the perimeter, we have projects, project plans, calendar, next action, and waiting for. So the first of these is the project list, and I wanted to talk about this separately and kind of highlight it because as I said, I had a huge epiphany when I was reading about this on this time going through the Getting Things Done book. It's not my first time. So I've mentioned previously that I have read this book before. I think this is about my 3rd time through, and this time around, the idea of the project list really leaped out to me. And I think the reason it grabbed me is because of the addition of this idea of in a year. So let me get this up. He defines a project as any desired result that requires more than one action step and can be accomplished in a year. Now, I don't know if that year time frame was added in this version or if I just missed it previously, but for some reason that just kind of really cinched this idea in for me. Uh, because I think before I felt like, oh, I have so many projects, and because I was considering projects in terms of my entire life rather than the stuff I'm looking at in a year. And when I think about all the things I want to do in my entire life, there's no way I could review that weekly. That's, so many items, and some of them are big things. But the stuff I want to work on within a year can absolutely be reviewed every week. And so with the addition of that 1 year criteria, my list of projects is that I review weekly is much smaller. And like I said, it's completely reviewable, and it's actually gotten really fast. The weekly review has been really helpful to me in keeping touch with, has anything gotten stalled? Do I have what I need? What have I dropped the ball on? And it's also been really helpful because I know how much I have on my plate and whether or not I can take something else on and when I expect to finish something. And I just started this a few months ago, and even as I was gathering all the projects for my project list, I realized, wow, I'm so overcommitted. Like so many of these things are just stalled because I have too many projects going. So I'm pretty much not taking on anything new until uh, all the stalled things are finished because they're started and not done. And I actually had, I didn't put this in at the beginning, but I had a win with respect to taking on new projects and using a project list in a weekly review. I get a catalog in the mail a few times a year for the local community college that does non-credit courses, and they're really interesting. You can get like, learn how to grow bonsai trees or watercolor or sustainable gardening, or you can get like a graphic design course. I mean, just all kinds of really neat things. And I love stuff like that. And normally, instead of just tossing the catalog, I would look through it and I'd bookmark a couple things and I'd think about it and maybe I would take one. This time when that catalog came, it was for the winter, so it just covers the next 3 months. And just being familiar with my project list and the fact that I already have a lot of projects that are started but stalled because I'm overcommitted, I just put it right in the recycling bin because I'm like, I can't take a class this winter. I'm not even going to bother looking. So that felt like a win, and it felt like I was very in control and very aware of my commitments and could make a good decision on that. Um, so with regard to the 1 year time frame, David Allen says that that time frame is important because anything you're committed to finishing within the year does need to be reviewed weekly in order for you to feel comfortable about getting that thing to its finished status. Because, a year's a long time, but you've only got 52 weeks in between now and then. So you're just looking at quickly reviewing that thing once a week for 50, at most 52 weeks to make sure it's moving forward. And the project list kind of gives you a placeholder to come back to each week and check in on the progress. In this section of the book, there is a sample project list you can take a look at for some inspiration and maybe some ideas to help you build out your project list. And he emphasized that you don't need to sort your projects in any kind of order or by priority or due date. They just need to be on one list so that they can be reviewed regularly. And in this location, he also gives a definition of done that I really liked, which is that enough action steps have been taken that some situation has been created that matches closely enough with what you envisioned that you can call the project done. And I really like this because it doesn't necessarily mean that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. It just means that it's close enough that it's done for your standards. Um, Earlier in one of the chapters, we talked about this concept of open loops and things that kind of weigh on your mind. And one of them was projects that are almost complete, but not quite complete enough to be taken off your list. And so I like this, that he gives you this criteria for done. And once you've reached that, this project is done and you can take it off of your project list and officially close that project. So Clark, any comments, feedbacks? Oh, let me,
Yeah. I guess the bit that really resonated with me on the project section was was the link or the closeness to kind of an agile mindset. So at work, we've been following more agile Scrum or Kanban over the last 4 or 5 years, and I think this really helped me to understand or kind of link the two together, so that a project list or a project itself is, in an agile sense, is called an epic. It's just a collection of things that need to get done. And I think then reading the book, it just kind of clicked, um, in that similar sort of setting of just having a list. If you wanted to prioritize it, then great. But yeah, you do need to review it weekly so that if things change, then you can, change the priority or change the goal or the definition of done for
mhm.
each of those projects. And I guess the definition of done that you've got on the screen there at the end is really what's the smallest bit of work or the smallest bit of satisfaction that's needed to get the project done. And that really I guess for me, it just really helped me to figure out how am I going to tackle projects both at work and at home, or when I'm running and things like that. So was a real eye opener for me to kind of join the two together.
Yeah. In that agile environment, what would you say would be the like? So in GTD, we have next actions, which are just the like physical, visible, like an action that you can take, and then a series of next actions would make up a project. Like, what would be an equivalent in the agile environment?
Yeah, so your project is an epic, which is
Hmm.
your collection of next actions, but they're generally called stories as such. So, I need, a story would be defined as something really clear to be, I need to do X, Y, Z. So for and so for work, it might be something like, I need to deliver this feature that the customer wants, and then it has within the kind of the definition of done, you say what the success criteria is, so it's really clear, and you kind of define that reasonably early. And then if there's like a follow-on from that, then there would be another project as such, with a set of next actions, if you then wanted to build on it. So yeah, so it's very similar. It's just different terminology as
Hmm.
such.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me just make sure there's no more comments here. Oh, okay. So we have a question. Do you have a separate page for each project or just a list? So, Lisa, I have a project list, and it's literally just a list in Google Sheets. In fact, where would I have that? Here we go. This was this was my GTD project list as of this was back in I think September. And this is an actual screenshot of what it looks like at what it looked like at that time. This is a Google Sheet, and it has the numbering system just tells me it helps me keep track of how many I have, and then I have the description if it's part of a bigger project, and then this is where the information is stored. And as you can see, some of these are. I have a little. It's not shown. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. I have a review key, which is that so the GTD criteria for a project. So the check mark means that the next action is defined and it's on a weekly to-do list or wherever it needs to be. Green means the item is reviewed and that there's no open loops, and red means on hold for now. And this is what it looks like when I do a weekly review. And these items that are in red were what I was talking about being overcommitted. Like I can't take action on them. So, oh, and then Lisa says, why not in OneNote? So I like the reason I didn't do it in OneNote is because I could do this in a table in OneNote, but my experience is that tables get bogged down. They get really slow to load and they slow down the notebook when they get too big. And this table, if this was a table, it could get really big. Like if I do the dates, like the earlier dates are further to the right, so that I just keep pushing them further away so that the current date is in my view. And say I use this for a year, I could have like 55 columns on this, and I feel like that table would get too big and it would bog down. That being said, I could do this in Excel if I wanted to embed it or keep it in the Microsoft family. And I did, kind of struggle with this decision. And then I finally said, just pick something and use it. And that's what I did. So it came down to just picking something and using it. But you could do it in OneNote if that works. That would be my only concern, though, is that like a big table in OneNote tends to bog down. So thank you for the question. So, so moving on, the next category. So we're done with the project list. We're moving on to the next of the actionable items, which is project support material. And this is just what it sounds like. It's like as you're tackling projects, you accumulate material related to those projects. And the project list is just the name of the project. The support material could be in computer files or paper files, but it should be by project. And David Allen gives some suggestions for good practices with your project support material, such as making sure the material is stored in a way that you can retrieve it and storing it out of sight when you're not using it, and make sure that you tidy and purge it regularly. So the third of the 5 actionable categories is calendar. And this is one of my favorite sections of GTD because he gives very specific principles for using the calendar. And those principles help you keep your calendar clean and useful as opposed to a big like mishmash of mixed up things. So before we talk about the calendar, I want to just go through these 3 questions that we ask each time a next action has been defined. And question 1 is, if it's less, is it less than 2 minutes? If so, then do it right away. If it's more than 2 minutes, we ask, am I the best person for this? If yes, then we're going to defer it to a later time. If we're not, then we delegate it and it goes into a waiting for or a follow-up category. And for the deferred next actions, there are 2 places it can go. If it's time specific, it goes on the calendar. If it's as soon as I can get to it, then it goes on the next action list. And just to show you how this fits into the workflow diagram, we're kind of in the center, the, the center column here, and we have highlighted in yellow what's the next action. If it's less than 2 minutes, we do it. If I'm not the right person, we delegate it. And if it's more than 2 minutes and I'm the right person, we defer it. And then for deferred actions, we're down here on the bottom. It goes either to calendar or to next actions.
Yeah, Michelle, just on the delegate option there, a tip that I do is I don't really have a follow up and waiting for people. I just like say it's majority of the time this is at work. If someone sends me an email and I delegate it, I kind of introduce the 2 together, and then they can then work on it together. They don't have to then include me to then kind of hand off the item, because that just creates a handoff and a delay and an extra piece of work that I need to do in the future. So I generally then introduce them and then they can go directly back, you know. So again, that could be something that people can look into to try and, if you are delegating it, see if you can reduce the handoffs.
Yeah, and just take yourself out of the equation, like when you can. That's great. Because I think when he talks about this delegate with a waiting on or follow up, that would be like if you're supervising people and you hand them something and you're responsible for making sure it gets done, then you would want to follow up. Or if someone says, "Oh, I'll get that to you in a week," you might need a reminder to follow up.
Yeah, I guess it depends what sort of culture or environment that you're working in at work. So I've been at companies that are very hierarchical and
Hmm.
information has to flow up the levels. Um, and yes, if I didn't have a team in that situation, but if I did, I would have had to kind of quality check it and pass it up the line. Whereas the company that I'm working for at the minute, it's a very flat management structure, so anyone can pass on information up the chain if they feel if it's of good quality and meets the brief that they need.
Hmm.
But yeah, it does depend on the situation
Hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do like the level of discernment that you've added to it, that you don't just because you hand something off, you may not need to follow up. Like follow up if you need to, but make sure you need to.
Yes.
Um, so calendar. So in GTD, only 3 things go on your calendar. Time specific actions, so that's appointments. Like I have a dentist appointment at 2 o'clock. Day specific actions, so that might be to call somebody on their birthday. And then day specific information, so that might be like directions to your appointments. And it could also be reminders for actions, like if if there's a deadline to register for something, and you might put that on your calendar. And then at the bottom I have it's these 3 things and nothing else. Somewhere in there in this section, he says that the calendar is sacred. Actually, let me go to the not on calendar. Yeah, okay. Things that don't go on your calendar are daily to-do lists. And he says he gives 2 main reasons. One is that the constantly shifting work and priorities. So if it's on your calendar, you have the hard landscape things like your appointments, and then you have these other things that may or may not get done and they may get moved. And he says if something doesn't have to get done today, then today's calendar is a mix of what you must do and what you might want to do if you're adding your daily to-do list, that is, and it dilutes the emphasis on what must be done today. So things that go on your he ties this together with this idea that the calendar is sacred. So you're only writing things that must get done today or are relevant today. And he further makes the point that the only time something should get rewritten on your calendar is when an appointment changes. So I really like this guidance on using the calendar. I feel like it's really tight and it keeps your calendar. It lets you use your calendar as the best tool for what the calendar is the best tool for, as opposed to just randomly putting a mishmash of things on there that are actionable, not actionable, and relevant today and not relevant today, etc.
Yeah, I find the calendar really powerful to be able to focus at particular times, and also allow kind of get out of meetings that you don't really need to be in. Um, I'm sure we've all been, yeah, invited to meetings that you don't actually say anything for an hour or two.
Hmm.
And so again, I'm quite strict. I might, yes, maybe selfish is probably a bit of a strong word, but I'm really strict on what meetings I accept. Am I going to add value in those meetings? Um, and push back where it's needed, because there's times, I'm getting better at it, but there's been times over the years where I'm in 4 or 5 meetings at the same time, and it's just not,
Yeah.
even in a virtual world, that's not possible. So it's I think having some ground rules around your calendar, particularly in the office calendar in Outlook for me, is really important.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point too. But just everything you said about too many that's another thing. In addition, like we were talking about emails, like the concept of like too many meetings is just so pervasive, and it's something that's so familiar to so many people. And I hear what you're saying. I balked a little bit the word selfish because that has like a negative connotation, and I would say maybe self-disciplined would be a better word because that's positive, and I think that what you're talking about is a positive practice, and it's a positive trait for someone to have. So
Yeah, yeah. There's so many times when people send me a message or put on a calendar, right? Say, oh, I see that you're free at this particular time, and it's like, well, I'm not in a meeting at that time. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm not busy doing something.
yeah.
And do you, I don't want to end up blocking my calendar out to do work. That seems counterintuitive. So I do need to be strict.
Hmm.
If things need a particular time to do things, then I do put it in there. But otherwise, if I'm just doing general work, it looks as though I'm free for a meeting, which isn't the same thing.
Right. Okay. So we're back on to talking about next action. So we just talked about which next actions should go on the calendar. It's day specific things, but that leaves a whole bunch of next actions that should not be on the calendar. And those are covered in here in item 3B on your screen. Um, all of these other things that are not on the calendar, which is probably going to be the vast majority of them, are tracked on next action lists. Um, So next action lists are items that, as we talked about, they take longer than 2 minutes because if they're shorter than 2 minutes, we do them while we're processing. They should be done by me and they're not time specific. They're kind of like as soon as I can get to it. And he mentions that if you only have 20 or 30 of these, you may be able to just keep a single simple list. But most of us will have between 50 and 150, so it may be helpful to separate them into categories. And this is something that where context and GTD had the earlier version, I think, had a whole lot of information on this, and it may come up later. But context may be helpful, so you may want to keep a list of things like errands to do when I'm in my car, or home repairs to do when I'm in my work clothes, or administrative work for when I'm at my desk for a longer period. So you can use the idea of a context. And in the original version of GTD, contexts were very physical or physically based, like at home, at the office, near the phone, etc. But I think you can expand that to, um, like I said, for administrative tasks, like when I'm doing paperwork and filling out forms and things like that, like I need to be in a certain mindset and I need to have a period of time when I'm going to be at my desk for a while. So even though that's not specifically a physical context, it's more of a frame of mind. Um, and I do think that most people who are like, implementing GTD are going to fall into that latter category where they don't just have 20 or 30 things that can go on one list and be looked at. Um, so, and then I think, yeah, the last part of the workflow diagram is just stuff that you have delegated and that you may want to keep that in a waiting for folder, um, that you have a reminder to follow up with. And I don't think there's much more that I can add in on that. But let me just check the chat here. I think that covers all the material in this section. Um, So that's all the material in the organize section of chapter 2. And hopefully this will give you a good start toward getting all of your GTD stuff organized. We're going to head into our wrap up now. So if you have questions or comments from myself or for Clark, you can go ahead and add those in now. Clark, do you have any final comments, thoughts? You had some great points today.
Thanks, Michelle. I I guess this is the one thing I struggle with. I'm not a very organised person. I think I'm good at the kind of the capture, the clarify, and the doing section. It's the organising, and I guess the weekly review, which I probably fall down on. Um, or that so yeah, so this is the one I am struggling with. I just wondered, is there any particular tips that you could give someone who is kind of starting out on these that could become useful?
Well, with the weekly review, it gets easier and faster. Like the more you do it and the more in touch, at least this was my experience. The more I've done it and the more in touch I am, like the more hands-on I am with those projects every week, it becomes easier. Because when I do the weekly review, it's like, oh, well, on Wednesday I did that next step and then I've already added the one after that to my list. So all I have to do is say, oh yeah, that one's good. So it gets really easy and fast. Um, and as I've worked through it and become less overcommitted, I have fewer open projects and I'm getting to a more appropriate number, which again makes it easy and faster. And it also doesn't have to be weekly, in my opinion. And even David Allen says that it's like it doesn't it's a like I like to use the rule like most of the things most of the time. And so if I can do it 2 or 3 out of 4 weeks of the month, that's fine. It's better than nothing, and it's even that is enough to keep you balanced and on track. And that column I added that says where the project material is has been really helpful too, because I don't have that point of friction. Like I already know where the material is. In terms of getting organized, what I have found is that it's for me with getting things done is it's really been very iterative, meaning I try something and then I realize, oh, I should really separate those things. So I separate them and I'm like, okay, that works well. And it's just been sort of kind of go about my life, do the next actions, do the weekly review, realize something's not organized, go back and fix it. So I've been actually doing that for a while, probably a few months now. And I still wouldn't say I'm completely organized, but I'm getting there. It's getting much, much better. And adding definitions to each of the places where I keep things has been helpful as well. Like I did a big split out of my someday maybe, and to make sure those are really someday maybe items, and then the things that I really definitely need to do sometime sooner on, those are just uh, definitively separated. Um, So yeah, I think that's it. Is just keep like it gets easier with time, and then the organization part is just kind of it improves as I go, and I'm changing it as I go. Um, yeah, I can't. If anyone has anything in the chat, if you have struggled with this and you're working on your implementation, I'd love to hear your tips as well about how you stay consistent with a weekly review and how you organize your all your next actions and projects and things. Oh, thank you, Lisa. She said she enjoyed having us both.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. And thanks,
Um,
Michelle. And thanks, Michelle, for doing the stream at a UK friendly time.
no problem. Yeah, we have hopefully I'm saying the name right, Hannah from Denmark as well. Um, so that was nice to see. Um, yeah, I do want to rotate back and forth too, because it is nice to be live with people, even though they can catch the replay. Like I like having people on us, live. So, so yeah, it looks like that's about it for now. I don't have the next stream scheduled yet, but I once it's scheduled, it'll be in the description, and you can subscribe to the channel and watch the community tab. I usually announce it in there, and if you're in any of my Facebook groups, especially the OneNote Bullet Journal group, I usually announce it there too. Um, but I think we're going to cover the final two sections of Chapter 2, which would be reflect and engage. So just continue reading GTD and make sure you're noting down how things are changing for you and any wins you have so that we can celebrate them next time. Because that's a really important value for me personally. I have found great benefit from really paying attention to those wins and highlighting them and celebrating them and enjoying them because it kind of gives you evidence that you are making progress and moving forward in life. So I'm going to do one more final check of the chat. Ah, thank you, Hannah. She says, bravo, Michelle. And Linda says, thank you. I'm enjoying these discussions. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, and Michelle, if I could just take this opportunity just to thank everyone in your community for doing these webcasts. I know it's definitely helping me process and be a better person. I know that you're doing it to kind of learn yourself and help other people along the journey as well. So thanks for all you're doing for the community.
Oh, you're so welcome. And that is so nice to hear. That's like my number one thing as doing like YouTube and creating stuff is just to be helpful to people. So like that to me is just the greatest like thing that I can hear. I love that.
Yeah, I don't know. I stumbled across your streams for trying to be better at using OneNote and things like that, and then tried bullet journaling and now GTD. So yeah, it's your content's been really helpful to me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That is just like I said, that's like my very best favorite thing is when something I've done has helped somebody. So thank you for spending this time with me, everyone who was live with us here. It was really fun to have you. It was fun to have your comments. And Clark, thank you again for accepting this last minute invitation to join the stream. And it was really a pleasure having you. I think you added a lot. You had some really good tips, especially like in an email and meeting heavy work environment. And yeah, that was it. I really had fun. Make sure you like the video and subscribe on your way out. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day wherever you are. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
All right.